I've built an entire law firm around taking cases internationally, in particular in Asia. And then now more and more, we're getting more and more cases in Europe. And that's great because we're closer to Europe. The time zone difference isn't as much. I noticed in the last year, we've taken on a lot more cases out there, which is great. But in Asia is particularly difficult because you really are so far away. And so first off is communication, being able to communicate with your clients, being able to have access to them, in addition to just have an internal messaging system that we have through our client portal. We're available on WhatsApp. We flex our time zone to them. I understand the area. When I land there, I don't need to be babysit. I know exactly where I'm going and how to get around and what to do. So I think that gives them a lot more reassurance that the attorney they have isn't out there for a vacation. They're not out there to check the box. Oh, I'm going to go explore Seoul and take some IG pics from Nansum Tower, right? It's the last thing I want to do. I want to get in there, get down to Humphreys, get down to Osan, get down to Daegu, get ready to go win the case and get the hell out of Dodge.
Tim, welcome back to another episode of Off the Record. I know that you recently got off a long-winded trip. Seems like it was around the world. So I want to talk to you about worldwide travel, how it affects you, how it affects your clients as well. But more specifically, what's something that people would be shocked to learn about doing legal defense in another country? Because everybody's used to working in the United States. When you're going to Japan, when you're going to Europe, what are some of the things that they would be surprised about?
I think people underestimate the impact of the length and the time of the flights, how difficult that can be for the uninitiated. I think people greatly underestimate how difficult that can be if you don't know what you're doing, you haven't done it a while. Yeah, I've been traveling extensively for 15 years straight. This year alone, I've done 2 trips circumnavigating the globe. I've got one more in 3 weeks. I will have done 3 trips around the globe where I've connected all the way around in the last 3.5 months, which is incredible. That's not normal, but that is the way things are this year. And I think people underestimate the toll that can take on you if you're not prepared. I mean, someone travels to Asia and now you have a 12-hour time zone difference. People say, I can't, they're just dragging ass for a week afterwards. But the reality is when you travel there, I land, I have to be ready to go the very next day. And it's the ultimate away game, right? Where you are at a disadvantage from the beginning in this away game because of the distance you have to travel. And so, for example, if a trial is going to start on a Monday, I will leave the Monday prior. And so, because if I leave the Monday prior from Florida, I will get in, let's say it's Korea. I do that trip a lot. I'll leave Monday night. By the time I land at Incheon Airport, it's at 4 in the morning on Wednesday morning. And by the time I get to Korea, it's 7 or 8 a.m. on Wednesday. So you're going to lose 2.5 days just traveling because you lose a day in the international date line. Plus you have 20 something hours of travel. It's 5.5 to SFO. It's another 13 hours from San Francisco, plus the time in the airport. So you have 20 plus hours of travel. And so by leaving on a Monday, you're starting on a Wednesday. And not only that, you've just changed from day to night. And so 7 a.m. becomes 7 p.m. And so getting through the brain fog and pushing through and the ability to do that, most people who I've seen do it who don't typically do that are a absolute mess and underestimated. I've seen civilian counsel who don't take cases in Asia. Maybe they'll take a case in Asia because it seems like, hey, it's so great, I'll go to Asia. And maybe they'll take their family, they'll just take a vacation out of it, which I think is, I have my own problem with.
Yeah, we've talked about that.
And I just see how, not shocked, but how difficult it is for them to do it. And I would say, I don't know how you do this. How do you do these cases? Because the distances and the time zone difference can be just extraordinary. You have to know how to do it. I have a battle rhythm for how I do this. I understand circadian rhythm. I back up before I take the flights. I start adjusting onto the time zone. I have a very specific and not detailed, but a very specific way I do this. So when I land, yeah, I certainly can be jet lagged like anyone else, but usually by the day I'm on the ground or the next day I'm ready to go 100%. And just because I've been doing it for so long and I have a routine that works for me, that is the most difficult thing to do, is to travel 20 plus hours, be in a 12-hour time zone difference and work immediately and work at peak and optimal performance. And you're on the road. And so now you have all the issues of things in the office that you need to handle that are 12 hours different. You don't have all the resources you would because you're in a foreign country. You have to know that country, know what it's like, know where you're going, and it has to be almost second nature to you, or your ability to do it successfully is going to be greatly, greatly diminished.
You've built a practice around flying anywhere
Yeah.
in the world to defend a case, but has there ever been a moment where you've kind of regretted taking that flight?
Yeah, I have to be honest, sure. Sometimes I'll say, "What the hell am I doing?" Right? Yeah, I mean, I love travel, and I built a 15-year practice on I focus on my art special, if you wanna call that, is taking cases overseas. And we'll take cases CONUS, but the vast majority of my cases throughout my 15 years as a civilian counsel, and even in my last duty assignment was in Asia. I've made a practice out of doing that because I think service members are grossly underrepresented when they're overseas because they don't have access to quality civilian counsel because most people don't want to take cases out there because it's very difficult and it's expensive and time consuming to get there. A lot of civilian counsel will say, well, why would I fly all the way to Asia and burn 40 hours just travel time? I mean, it's 40 hours just
Yeah, just
travel
travel time.
time, just in travel time to do a case there when they can take one at the local base that's near where they're at and they can make more money and save more time. But I think service members are grossly underrepresented at these bases overseas. And I really like doing it. I still enjoy the travel. And sometimes it has its moments, right? And where it has its moments are when I have to be in Asia one week and then in Europe the next week. That's where things become highly problematic. We say, do you regret those types of flights? Yeah, which is why I do a lot of cases in Asia. And if I can batch cases, I can do a trip to Korea. I can do a trial there, fly from there to Okinawa. Now I'm on the time zone. I'm already acclimated to the time zone. It's easier for myself. It's easier for the clients. I can batch cases. That's by far and away the best situation. It saves time, it saves money, it saves effort, and it works out for everyone. Where the
Yeah.
problems come in, you talk about the regret, is if I have a trial at Camp Humphreys, Korea, and then next thing I know, I have a motions hearing that I have to be at in Wiesbaden, Germany. Well, now what? Right?
Mm,
Now what?
mhm.
And so you
Well,
have
now
to
what? What is the answer to that?
you do a global trip. You do one around this is why you go all around the world. You just keep going, right? And so you finish in Korea and then you do a flight from Korea to Germany. And you can there's a lot of ways you can connect that, but you do a flight from Korea to Germany. Like I did that.
Well, that's kind you just did that, didn't you?
I
Just
did,
like
and so my
last month.
yeah, I did, and I had a case in Asia, and so then you just connect. You get what's called an around the world ticket, and you finish your case in Korea, and then you can connect. You can a lot of different ways you can do that. You can do that through Hong Kong, through Bangkok, through Dubai. There's a lot of ways to do that, but what's harder is to fly in one direction and then go back. It's significantly more challenging. You just can keep on going. It sounds maybe doesn't sound intuitive, but I've done enough to know that you just connect the cases. And so that's where it becomes more difficult is you just finish a case in Korea and then 2 days later you're in Germany. Okay, so then you do another let's say you transit via BKK, right? And so you go from Seoul to Bangkok's 5 hours, Bangkok to Frankfurt is another 12. So now you've got a 17 hours with connection time. It's another 20 hours of travel door to door to get to this new installation. And that's where things become more difficult to do. And so, to the extent possible, I try not to put myself in a situation where I need to be in Asia and then Europe and then back home, but inevitably it happens. And so, if that happens, I try to just link the cases and I'll just make one trip. And like this year, I have another one coming up in a couple months where I'll have circumnavigated the globe in 3 times this year already. That is not for the uninitiated. If you haven't done that before, you can do it and, "Oh, it's cool. You can check the box." But most people are just an absolute disaster once they land or once they're done because the jet lag is so extreme. 'Cause you're never fully catching up.
What makes some of these cases, I guess, sometimes, for a lack of better word, more dangerous? Like, not just, legally, but, like, logistically, or do you find that traveling worldwide that there are some precautions that you have to take that you wouldn't have to just traveling, here in the United States?
Yeah, absolutely. You don't have the reach back ability, and if you miss something or don't have access to something, you need to make sure you have it with you. Um,
You're not.
and like think something just basic, right? You gotta make sure your suits get there. Right? I had a personal trip that was not related to a case. I was in Istanbul for a friend of mine's wedding. It was a personal trip that I took, and I was already in Asia. And so I flew in from Asia to Istanbul. And then my wife, who met me out for this wedding and was in Tampa. Well, my connection got delayed because of weather. And so I had a very tight connection on my way there. So my bags never arrived when I landed in Istanbul. And so I didn't have a bag for a day and a half because the airlines couldn't find it. My wife landed in Istanbul and we were there for a wedding. So she had special dresses she had, and it was a very fancy wedding. They didn't, United Airlines, good for them, lost her bag, not delayed. And they didn't find her bag for 3 days. And so we spent the first day and a half in Istanbul at a shopping mall trying to get a suit. She's trying to find a dress, everything else. And it was stressful doing that because there for a wedding. But what if we're there for trial? And now I'm there and I don't have suits. Imagine that. And so you have to take that into consideration, which is why you never cut it to the last minute. You're there early enough to where if an airline loses all your stuff, you've got a day or two. So you're not showing up to court like my cousin Vinny in the crazy suit that you found somewhere. You know what I mean? And so
Yeah,
that
yeah.
doesn't happen very often, but it happened to my wife and I on the same trip, which is the odds are probably pretty low that that's going to happen. So you have that. Think about medical issues. What if you get sick? You have to take very good care of yourself. So if you get sick, you don't have access to the military treatment, to the MTFs, because I'm not on active duty. And so I'm stuck getting healthcare on the economy, which can be difficult to do. So you have to take care of yourself. You have to make sure you're not sick. You have to take whatever supplies you need. And so there are a lot of things you need to consider when traveling to a foreign country to do these cases, that it's a lot more work, a lot more thought has to go to them. There's a lot more cost and expense to the clients, because the flights are inherently very expensive now. And not only that, but there's the timing of it, all of it. And so, which I try to select the cases very carefully, the ones that we take on, because by my preference, I do all my cases in Asia would be great. But I've been taking more and more cases in Europe because I think there's a need for that as well. And so it becomes on our end. One of the things I have to do is ensure that I'm taking the right cases that work my schedule correctly, if that makes sense. It's like playing Tetris, trying to line up all the pieces to make them all work together. So I can't take every case, and I have to be careful with the cases that I take on because I have to think about the logistics when I do it, which is very different than about just taking local cases.
We spent the past 10 minutes talking about a lawyer doing worldwide cases. Let's start thinking about the actual service member that's there. Let's kind of move towards that topic where somebody's stationed far away. They feel like nobody's coming for help, even though you say, yeah, I'll be there in 2 weeks or whatever. How do you show them that, hey, to keep the faith? You feel like you're alone, but I'm working on your behalf, even though I'm not really right there. Like y- the psychology with that. Do you find that the people that are being charged overseas handle it more differently than they would, like, say, if they're in Florida, right?
Sure. Yeah. And I think that's inherent in the nature of just being so far away. They can't go to your office to go meet with you to get that reassurance. And and so they're gonna be sometimes a little bit more tense, and you have to and that's why it's helpful that I do so many cases in Korea. I'm afraidly in Japan and Okinawa, which is also Japan, that you're a well-known quantity, that, we work our schedule around their time zone. So they don't need to flex to us, we flex to them. And how many times, am I doing early morning calls, 5 a.m., 6 a.m., because it's there 5 or 6 p.m. I'm doing calls late into the evening. So because we have so many cases in Asia in particular, we flex our hours, we flex our schedule. We're very adept, probably more so than any other law firm that does what we do in the world to take on these types of cases. I built an entire law firm around taking cases internationally, in particular in Asia. And then now more and more, we're getting more and more cases in Europe. And that's great because we're closer to Europe. The time zone difference isn't as much. I noticed in the last year, we've taken on a lot more cases out there, which is great. But in Asia is particularly difficult because you really are so far away. And so, first off, is communication, being able to communicate with your clients, being able to have access to them, in addition to just have an internal messaging system that we have through our client portal. We're available on WhatsApp. We flex our time zone to them. I understand the area when I land there. I don't need to be babysit. I know exactly where I'm going and how to get around and what to do. So I think that gives them a lot more reassurance that the attorney they have isn't out there for a vacation. They're not out there to check the box. Oh, I'm going to go explore Seoul and take some IG pics from Namsam Tower, right? It's the last thing I want to do. I'm going to get in there, get down to Humphreys, get down to Osan, get down to Daegu, get ready to go win the case and get the hell out of Dodge, right? That's what we do over and over and over again. And I think that gives clients a lot of reassurance just from going there so often. I've been traveling to Asia 8, 10 times a year for 15 years, literally, except for the COVID years. It slowed down quite a bit when you just couldn't travel there. But I think I've been there 6 or 7 times this year, right? It's almost once every month. And so it's a lot of travel. It wears on you when you're gone a lot, but it's also incredibly rewarding because you can take care of a service member that otherwise isn't going to get the representation he or she needs. You can do it very well.
So when they're talking with you, you're basically reassuring them saying, "Hey, it doesn't matter if you're in Florida or anywhere in the United States, or if you're in Asia, you're going to get the same. You are going to be represented well."
Well, if they're in
Um,
Korea or Japan, they're going to get the best representation possible by hiring us. There's no other law firm that's going to give them the type of representation we're going to give out in Asia. None. I've been to Asia and represented more service members in Asia than any other civilian attorney that I'm aware of by far and away. I know all of the bases. I've been to all of the bases. I know who the prosecutors, OFTC, the SJA is. They know me, and it's because I'm there so often. While that's the away turf, when I'm at Camp Humphreys doing a case there, and I'm at Pac Rim, I'm treated exceptionally well. I used to run that office in a prior life. When I'm in Okinawa, and I'm at Camp Foster, everyone knows me and they treat me exceptionally well. So again, I don't need to be babysat when I'm there. I'm not there to show my family around and give them this Okinawa experience. They're going to be represented better by our law firm than any other civilian law firm that's out there, and better than the military attorney, just because of the level of experience we have. When I take a case that's in Okinawa or Yokosuka, Iwakuni, Humphreys, Osan, Daegu, wherever it happens to be, while the travel can suck, I've done it so many times that I'm used to it. I can plan for it. I can build it into my battle rhythm. And when I'm there, I feel like I'm on my home turf when I'm out there, where someone else is going to feel, they're going to be dragging ass, they're going to be jet lagged, they're not going to know where to go, they're going to want to go to see, go to Namsam Tower, I'm going to go to the beach. Are you crazy? And that you're there for a trial, not for a vacation. And that's where, again, I've built a practice specializing in doing that over 15 years. It's what we do, more so than anyone else. Now we're doing that in Europe as well. 80% of our cases are OCONUS, maybe higher than that, because that's where we specialize in doing that. I want to do those cases. If I have the right case in the States, I'll take it. But I take on so many cases overseas because I think it's underserved, and that's where we really excel.